everyone. So today we're back on EAM with a new episode and a new incredible guest, Ali Shapiro. Hi, Ali. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. How are you, Marilyn? Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited to have you, Ali. So I want you to tell a lot about yourself. I'm just going to introduce you quickly. So you're a creator of Truth with Food. You're the host of the Insatiable Podcast, and also you have a link if you want in terms of personal, professional, and academic background to all of what you do. So, in your own words and with your own, ingredients and spices, tell us more about yourself.
I love that you used a food metaphor.
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually. I didn't do it on purpose.
Well, I think that will talk to a lot of what I'm going to speak to a lot of what I'm going to talk about, the metaphor of food. So I think the best place to start my story is probably close to 20 years ago. I had found functional nutrition, which is very popular today, but it was very much in its infancy. And what functional nutrition, functional medicine does is says, let's look at the root cause of physical problems. And at the time, I was struggling with irritable bowel syndrome, acne that would not go away. I tried antibiotics, Accutane. I had also tried all these meds for my IBS, and I was really struggling with depression. And I was also binging and emotionally eating. And I thought that all of my depression and IBS was because I was weak with food or whatnot. And what I eventually found through functional nutrition that a lot of my issues were caused by gut health. And my gut had been destroyed 10 years prior because I had had cancer as a teenager. And cancer, the chemotherapy, the steroids really destroyed my gut health, but we didn't have language for gut health back then. And it also made my emotional eating like I went from like dieting at age 8 to then emotionally eating after cancer. And then when I went away to college, it turned into binging. And when I learned about functional nutrition and that food could be medicine, not just calories, it was like this freedom. And I was able to reverse my acne, my IBS, my depression, the constant depression that I felt had lifted. And I thought, this is amazing. And then I couldn't keep it up when I was stressed. So, like in the cancer world, we call it scanxiety season. So, when I would schedule my appointments, go for the appointments, wait for the results, I was binging on sugar. And I was like, why am I doing this? I know now that cancer feeds on sugar. Like, why am I doing this? And I feel so amazing. So that's like one example of stress. And so I was like, why can't I keep this up? And at the time, I had started seeing clients on the side in functional nutrition. And we were doing grocery store tours. This was before people knew what quinoa was, kale, just trying to get them off processed foods. And I found out my clients were struggling with emotional eating. Like I had so much shame. I just thought it was just me. And I noticed that after about the fourth session, we would stop talking about food. But I didn't know what was working. It wasn't about the food. Why were they falling off track when they were feeling so good? So I went back to grad school at the University of Pennsylvania to really study, take a take a root cause resolution to emotional eating the way that I had done with nutrition. Okay, maybe depression, irritable bowel syndrome, and acne are symptoms, not these permanent diagnoses. So, what if falling off track and emotional eating is a symptom? What is the root cause of that? And that is where my work was born out of, and really understanding that food represents safety to us. And I can talk more about that, but that has been basically my story. And really, now I have a truce with food, meaning I don't fight food at all. I have a really healthy relationship with it. I can use it to support me medically. I mean, medically sounds so, but through my health, I joke moderation is the new radical. It's not diet culture. It's not eat whatever you want, because that didn't work for me. I have really sensitive blood sugar, as I know you understand blood sugar well. So it's really this like moderate place where we can use food to support our health, but we don't go crazy about it. And we can be consistent, but also have a very healthy relationship when we want to have birthday cake or whatnot. So I'll stop talking.
Oh no, I guess that's it's really interesting what you're saying. And first, like so courageous for the whole cancer issue and everything. So well done. And I'm sure it would give a lot of hope to people listening,
Oh,
like
thank
30
you.
years ago. So wow. It's
Yeah.
almost 30 years ago for you, isn't it?
31,
Yeah.
31 and a half now. I
Yeah.
can't believe it. Like it's wild to
Yeah.
think like most of my life has been as a post cancer instead of,
Yeah.
you know.
That's really nice. And then questions for the IBS and depression. Did you have like a diagnosis from physicians? Because a long time ago, like 20 years ago, it was also not known, or taboo to talk about depression. And definitely IBS was really not, I'm assuming it was not known.
It
Uh,
wasn't. In fact, I got my first colonoscopy at age 22 because I just said I'm coming in with I have heartburn, I have gas, I have bloating. It's like I have a lot of issues. And they gave me a colonoscopy because of my cancer history and my mom has had colon cancer and they found a polyp, but they were like, I don't know, take antacids. And I would later find out that for me, my IBS was actually not having enough stomach acid. So I was making it worse using the antacids. Yeah. And the depression, I cycled through many different antidepressants. I was seeing therapists, and it was very like, I didn't tell anyone because therapy was not
like so taboo.
main. It was so taboo. Yes. So I appreciate you saying that because it was a really different world than it is now to try to get better.
And it
So
still is a bit in some countries. Like I have a lot of people saying to me, "Oh, I don't need therapy. Thank God, I'm not there yet." It's like for them, therapy is like really like, if you're really, really effed up.
yeah, that's such a good point culturally. Yeah, it's so different based on where you are in the
Yeah,
world. So yeah, it was a lot of hodgepodge. This seems to work, this doesn't, it was a really hard time that I think sometimes I forget how hard it was because the information, I even tell people like even newspapers in the US didn't have health sections at the time. Like there was
yeah,
so, now you go on Instagram and you can get like too much information, but this
yeah.
was just like, and that was one of the things when I went to my holistic nutrition school where I found functional medicine. I was just like, why doesn't anyone know about this? Like, this is incredible. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, but part of it was just in its infancy and just trying to become evidence based and more information. And I just found, I found someone, Jackie Doyle, who is an acupuncturist. She's in Philadelphia, where I used to live, in new functional medicine, and helped me get off gluten. It took a while because I was binging on other sugary stuff because of the restriction, but really just did some simple stuff, not very elaborate of what functional medicine is today. But did some simple stuff, and gut health takes a while, but it really freed me from
Yeah,
understanding what was happening, but not the emotional eating.
yeah,
It improved it, but not it improved it, but it didn't resolve it.
yeah. I have so many questions about. I will talk later in the episode about functional. How do you call it? Functional eating or for nutrition.
Yeah, it's functional medicine, functional nutrition. It's just a way of looking at food as medicine
Yeah,
to address fatigue, Hashimoto's, depression. And I do want to be clear because there is some people think um you know, for me, it resolved a lot of my depression. I have clients who their diets can help, but they still need medication. It's so sometimes in the functional nutrition world, there can be claims of you just need to do this. So I want to be clear that diet can be a tool, it's not always the
yeah.
only tool.
Yeah, let's talk more about this functional medicine. I also want to talk just for the listeners to just a sneak peek of what's coming. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk also about like a method or like an anagram that you have. It's called TAIL, which is also all the reasons that we go to food. But first, something you said in the intro that really like sparked my attention was you talked about moderation, and there is almost like for me how I feel about myself, and I think listeners as well, it's like the tyranny of moderation. As you said, it's like the new cool word. How do you do it when and you spoke about anxiety and like I'm sure other people have other reasons why their phases where they have more anxiety. How yeah, do you feel the aim is to always be through moderation, or within moderation you will have ups and downs?
Yeah, well, I think moderation is contextual. So I think it looks different. And what I always say to my clients is we're not to really heal your relationship to food. It's not like, oh, am I perfect? It's like, have I done better than I did in the past? And the work that I really have them do is understand the emotional reasons that maybe they ate out of alignment with their goals. So for example, we have American Thanksgiving coming up, and it's like sometimes you just want to eat a lot of pie. Like one day of that, who cares, right? But it's when it becomes you're turning to pie all the time that you don't really want to be doing it. So I think moderation is a lot of people just focus on the food and food rules. And I think it's understanding, how do I keep my blood sugar balanced so that I can eat moderately? Because if you go into a party, right, and you're starving and the first thing you eat is a drink or sugar, you're going to be hungrier and it's going to be really hard to be moderate. Um, so it's about blood sugar, but then it's also about what are the emotional triggers that are making you not be able to be moderate. And so I think it's looking at it holistically of why moderation is so challenging. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, just the idea they've internalized so many food rules that even if they're like, oh, if they've heard that it's good to eat before you go to a party, right? And
Mm.
then they can't do that because they ran out of time, then they already feel like inadequate and that they've failed, and then they're eating because they couldn't follow a rule that maybe wasn't flexible for their real life, and then they're eating because of this inadequacy sense, because they didn't follow the food rule. So
Yeah, it's
there's
like linking back to perfectionism, as you were saying.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have an episode on that actually. Yeah, I think perfectionism is very linked to emotional eating.
Yeah, well, it's a safety strategy,
Yeah.
right? People think they're perfectionists, but it's like, no, that's a strategy to make you feel safe that you're going to get, recognized, and there will be no criticism, no judgment, so it's a total safety strategy. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, since we're talking about safety, let's talk about your tail. Like, is it called anagram? How do you call it in English? Like, because yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's a good question.
I think
Oh my God, I'm
anagram.
blanking.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it while you talk. No, I'll Google
Yeah.
it later. I'll put it somewhere in the show notes. If people are interested, they can send me a DM and tell me what is, the word tail, tail. You call it, and every word
Yes.
means something. So let's let's get into it. What does each letter stand for, and how can they help the listeners?
Yeah. So I just want to first take a step back and tell people what I mean about food as safety so that the tail triggers make sense to them. So a lot of what we see in the emotional eating space, in the coaching space, is what we would call behavioral science. So if you are overeating, we're looking at, oh, it's the food behavior that we need to correct. So don't keep food in the house, keep food in the house, right? Like, so what ends up happening with that is more rules. And my approach is to take a developmental step back and look at it relationally or emotionally. So saying, what need is this emotional eating satisfying? And so it's looking at the emotional eating as, why does this make sense, rather than, why are you doing this? Let's control you more. And if we need to control you more, we need more rules. So it's a much more holistic perspective. So
Yeah,
when
and
I,
you're not going against it. You're going with it, I guess.
yes, the
Yeah.
same way that my depression and irritable bowel syndrome and acne made sense because my gut needed repaired, your eating makes sense because there is some safety need that isn't being met. And this is where the tail makes sense. So as children and young adolescents, safety is really about feeling like we are going to be chosen by our caretakers to survive, right? Chosen by our peers so that we are included. The developmental leap that we have to make and the invitation in emotional eating is us starting to say, what do I choose? What is important to me? And it may be different than my caretakers, my peers, my work environment. So now I think the tail triggers will make a lot more sense with that
It's very
background.
relevant. And I just want to repeat it because I think this will change a lot of, like if your listeners remember it, you said, what do I want to consider as bringing me safety? That's maybe not what my caregivers taught me, told me that, it's very, very interesting. And I think in a lot of culture, for example, I come from a culture where you really follow the elders, even if when you're an adult, you just follow what the elders say and think and everything, and you don't think for yourself. So basically you're saying just
Yeah.
think for yourself, use your adult brain.
Yeah. And I think it developmentally, you don't want to come out of your early 20s with no moral compass, right? So
Yeah.
following your elders and everything has really worked. Really following, if people have worked and tried diets, right? Diets work at first. You get attention, you feel great, right? So it's like, again, there's grains of truth to this. Not saying that you have to be in diet culture, not saying that we want to discard everything the elders say, but when we are in our early adolescence, we think, oh, that is right or wrong, that is good and bad. Like I thought being a vegetarian as a cancer survivor was good, but I was having crazy sugar cravings, and I wasn't even I was eating like soy dogs, right? And it's like, actually my body needs meat. So that's just one way of saying it doesn't mean I shouldn't eat vegetables and try to get more plants in, but for me, and so, but that is a deeper relational way of being able to trust in satisfaction instead of restriction. So the relational need, the emotional need was to feel satisfied, right? And so when our emotional needs aren't met, we turn to food. So
It's
the
very
tail,
interesting what you're saying because I feel in the health world now, especially on social media and online, it's like very binary, was right or wrong. And what you're saying is like very in the in between, which in general life is in the between. So yeah, thank you for that.
yes. Well, and I like that you pointed that out because it requires developmental work to not be black and white.
Yeah.
Like most people, like, again, it's a developmental standpoint. And I mean, there's some controversy over this, but developmental psychologists think that about 60% of adults will never leave the binary, right? Because the only way that you would consider and have to develop is if you have what's called an optimal conflict. And food is an optimal conflict. It's something that, oh my God, this is causing me pain every day. It's interfering with my life. And then you also need the right support to overcome it. So otherwise it's just conflict. So that's why I always say food is this invitation into a more expansive understanding of other choices that we have.
Yeah.
So I always say to my clients, again, first, rather than beating yourself up or thinking you need more control or rules, when you're overeating, emotionally eating, the first thing you want to say is, why does this make sense? Why just practice reorienting to this makes sense.
Taking
Even
notes
if
for myself, even though I've been working on this for years,
yeah.
I think it's still gonna like work. I think whether you're advanced or very early, you always need to hear it. So taking
Totally,
notes, yeah.
totally. Yeah. And it also, physiologically even if you don't believe it at first, the more you see that this works, the more it relaxes you for more insight. So, because what we're also trying to do emotionally is repair our relationship with ourselves, right? Like my clients are like, how can I not basically know how to feed myself and eat well? It's like, yeah, because there are so many conflicting messages. So why does this make sense? And then when you start thinking about, ooh, some of my clients, they're like, I start fantasizing at 3 o'clock when I'm going to eat at night. or I'm at a work, I just got off a work call and I just want to go to the candy dish. Or I'm about to pick my kids up and I want to eat the trail mix in the fridge, And in the
Like in a
beginning,
way, how is it protecting me?
well, what you want to ask is when you start, I call it food noise. When you start thinking of that food noise, you want to say, what's at the tail end of this? So we're trying to get to the root cause. So what emotional trigger is happening? And T stands for tired. A stands for anxious, which is usually uncertainty coming from the outside. So if you think of COVID, right, a lot of people emotionally ate because, oh my God, what is this virus? What are the rules? All of my communities, at least, there's a lockdown, all of my routines are going away, right? So that's uncertainty when it hits you from the outside. I is inadequacy. And that's when that's when the call's coming from inside the house. Like, why do I feel too much or not enough? And then the last one is loneliness. And loneliness, it's really important for those of us who struggle with food. We can feel very separate. And we think it's, because you eat in so many different contexts and situations. And loneliness is when your social needs are not being met. So you could be around other people and feel very separate and alone if you can't share your full self. So asking, why does this make sense? What's at the tail end of this? And then once you can identify the trigger, and there may be one or two together, right? But focusing on the one that's the most accessible is thinking about what is the need that I have there that needs to be met. So, for example, tiredness. Usually, as we're growing up as kids, right, we are rewarded with food, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm just thinking as a live example, I've had a rough summer, very busy and everything. So I think, and my emotional eating or my, yeah, not good eating, all the things that we shouldn't say, but we say to ourselves,
Yeah.
kicked in. I think it was a bit, most of it was tired. As you said, it was a combination, a bit of anxious, but tired a lot. So, yeah, we can follow this example with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So okay, so it's tiredness, right? And as kids, um, and as teenagers, usually, like I ask listeners, and I'm going to ask you, like, can you think of times when you were a kid where you were rewarded with food?
For me, it's hard. Deep down, there is a sense that yes, but also a preteen. I was no, actually I was okay. Basically, the story is everyone wanted me to lose weight, so I was always put on a diet. But in big events like Christmas or my birthday or when things were rough and tough, yes, there was food.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that would probably be the uncertainty, right?
Yeah,
Like, oh my God, like this is,
yeah.
I'll get to that. But often, at least here in the States, and maybe this will, people realize like, oh, if you left the playground when you didn't want to, you were like, well, go get you cookies.
Mm,
Or like when I was afraid to jump off the diving board, my dad was like, well, go
yeah.
to Dunkin'
Yeah,
Donuts.
after the dentist.
Yes, after the dentist, right?
Which is
You
so funny.
Yes, exactly. They do it here. It's like, oh, you go to the doctor. Do you want a lollipop? So
Yeah.
when you do things you don't really want to, you're rewarded, right?
Yeah.
So that, and again, we need significance. We need to feel like we're doing a good, like we need to feel recognized. So as adults, when we're tired, we don't honor that we need rest. We say, no, I will treat myself with food. That is the reward. Because I still want to feel significant. I still want to do a good job. Right. And so rather than resting, we feel like if we rest, we're not going to be seen as significant. We're not going to accomplish. And so it's like, it makes sense though, then we use food to be the reward. Well, I just did all of this to get the accomplishment. Or a lot of people use food, especially sugar, to give them energy to keep going.
It's funny, I just did an episode on this, and these were my thoughts. 100% sure that everyone would agree, like, because this is my experience, but this is what I feel. And I've had this experience recently when I launched my journal. So tired, 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 tired. It's not that I went to sugary food, but I didn't have the headspace to, okay, really think, okay, what do I need? Do I really need this or not, etc.
Well, and I love that you bring that up because people think that, tiredness is just sleep, but there's actually 7 different types of rest we need. And mental rest is
Oh,
one of them.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, there's emotion. And this is from Jordan Maney, who is a coach in the States, um, introduced me to this concept. And I'm forgetting the woman, a doctor. You Google a TED Talk, there's
Okay.
7 types of rest, but creative rest is one of them,
Oh, yeah.
emotional rest. And so I love that you bring this up because so many of my clients realize, like, oh my God, I'm so much more tired than I realize. Like, this is such a trigger. And when you're so exhausted all the time, it's hard to realize that you're as tired as you are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so true. And when it's mental, like, or emotional or stuff in the head, I guess your adrenal glands and everything is like kicked in because there is a danger. But your body, it's not that your muscles are tired, like when you like, or you're like sleep deprived. It's another time. You feel it differently in your body.
Yes, yes. And we need actually physical rest too, which is
Yeah.
there's active rest where you're like walking or exercising. And then there's also like yoga and I do legs up the wall sometimes before I run to get my
I
son
used
in
to love this when I was
daycare.
younger. Yeah. When I was
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
ballet. Yeah.
So we're often, and we need sensory rest is a huge one, right? If you're on the
Yeah.
computer all day, on social media.
Hypersensitive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I also have an
yeah.
episode on that because I also very sensitive to sound. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
I'm like the perfect case for you like today. It's good. It wasn't planned.
But I think this will be so helpful for people, right? Because this is
Yeah.
so in our world, especially because again, rest is seen as not productive. And so it's like, I don't need that, it's like I will just and the temporary salve is like, well, I'm accomplishing, I'm getting my journal done in this case, or, I got to get the kids or whatever it is. So there's an unmet need for rest there, right? So like we first have to just see like, oh, this is not about the food. The food is the solution, not the
Yeah.
problem. So then when it comes to uncertainty, and again, we need to feel significant. We need to feel proud of what we've done. It's just not doing it. We're doing it constantly is the issue, right? So then anxiousness. So you brought up about during hard times, right? So I asked people, think about when there was a lot of uncertainty. Maybe it was chronic or not in your life, right? And when food, and you kind of answered it, right? When things were hard. Some of my clients came from like very chaotic households, and food was the thing that they would go out to eat and everyone would get along, at the time.
It's so true. I had a chaotic childhood and I think it was not so obvious that they would like sometimes of course every now and then they would bring food in uncertain times, but also modeling you see your parents coping unconsciously. I think it was a role model. Okay, I see my mom eating pasta when she's not well, so I record this.
100%. And again, in cultures forever, food is used to help during thresholds, right? Like birthdays, funerals, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
celebration.
Funerals, yeah, it's very common.
Yes,
Yeah.
thresholds of, but the problem is that there's and it orients us, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really healthy thing. But when it becomes chronic uncertainty and we don't know how to ground and root without
Mhm.
food, food
Yeah.
will be the most accessible way to do that. So again, with uncertainty, I always think of, okay, we need some sort of structure around that, right? And again, on the surface, it looks like diets would provide that, right? If we take it very concretely to food, it's like, oh my God, if I feel out of control around food, if I feel out of control around life, I need more control. But what we need is flexible structure, right? So, like, one of the questions I have my clients ask themselves when things are uncertain, it's like, what's essential? Like, what what has to happen so that you feel resilient and capable, And so maybe it's like one or two health things, but then also what do you emotionally need to knock
Mm,
off your to-do list? What do you need to, maybe you need to extend a timeline. But if something is all of a sudden comes and gets you, and comes and gets you, that's not the
yeah,
word, but
yeah.
knocks you off your game, like I'm thinking like when my son, he did not sleep well for 2 years. So it was like, okay, is the day going to be rested or not? It's like, okay, what is essential? Like really essential. And that can help be that flexible structure of this is what I need to do for my health. Like, and for me, it's always get my blood sugar balanced and then everything else I can't worry about. But this helps me show up. And that's another great question is not the outcome, but how do I want to show up in this uncertainty? Can give us some sort of agency, control, self-determination amongst a really chaotic time,
Yeah.
in our
And
lives.
how about the subtle like uncertainties, like which are I think very common every day? Like, I don't know, you might be late to a meeting, I don't know, your inbox is full and you're not sure if there's something like really important that you haven't done. All those everyday small things, someone has to go to the doctor to do a checkup, but it's small, all those small things.
Yeah.
What do you do to ground yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think,
Is it
and this
individual?
is,
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is more like strategic, but can also be tactical. So this goes back to the beginning where I said the chance to figure out what safety means as an adult is like, what do I choose? What's important to me here? So I think it's asking ourselves, we can't do everything that's coming at us. And it's having a decision making filter that's aligned with our values, right? And the season of our life, right? So, like, for example, my son is going to turn 4 in a couple weeks, but the last 4 years, he's had to be the priority, right? Like my
Yeah.
work has had to slow down.
Mm.
Again, some people, with the kind of help that we had, everyone has different situations, but I did not, I wanted him to be the priority. And I'm not saying that's the right thing for everyone, right? And I also have a certain amount of privilege and also don't have certain privileges. So I want to acknowledge all of that, but we have to see with like what is important to me at this time. And that includes in those emails, like, is this something that I have to take care of? is
Yeah.
this is this like the hill I want to die on? That's like also often when I'm asking myself, because I care a lot about a lot of issues. And it's like I can't care about everything. It matters to me to make a deep impact. So
Yeah,
what
it's
do I
funny that
stick
you say this. I had an episode on anxiety with a therapist she's called Emma from Therapy in a Nutshell, talking about anxiety. And she said, also define your core values. I mean, it was like almost more than a year ago, so I hope I'm making it justice. So, but define your core values. And if you have small stressors, like, for example, things like that, that, it's not going to take a risk on you, like a big risk in your life, just do it and overcome it. Just will doing it or overcoming it or going through it, will it be aligned to your values? If yes, just go through it. That's what you were saying. Yeah. So very
Yeah,
common. Yeah.
because yeah, and this pulls into like the tiredness. We only all have so much energy and capacity in a day,
Yeah.
right? I know you're in the UK, but in America, our culture is there's no limits, like
Yeah.
whatever,
Here also. Yeah.
and and that actually makes us anxious too,
Yeah. Yeah. You
right?
can be
Like
whatever
if you
you
think
want.
about, I mean, we've both,
No, yeah, I was just
yeah,
saying,
I
yeah,
mean,
you can be whatever you want. There's this thing, and then you're like, oh, okay, then I have to be everything if I can be
yeah.
everything.
But it's like I always bring it back to like again my son is a toddler and it's like he feels safe when there's boundaries. When I say, "Look, I'm going to sit here and let you have your feelings and we still have to go home. I know it's hard for you and how can we make it easier?" Right? So it's like boundaries make and that is why I think people are attracted to diets in the first place. They offer
Mm,
boundaries. The problem is the boundaries are too rigid.
like a parent,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
an invisible parent.
Well, and it's funny you should say that because a lot of times we think our thoughts are our own, but they are what we saw modeled. The voices in our head are our parents, our peers' work of no, you're good, bad. Like you have to earn your goodness versus, no, it makes sense. You're good. You're all good. Like we just need to help you develop along. So then the next one is inadequacy, right? And so
Inadequacy, I was thinking of it, and sorry, like I talk a lot. When we
I
were
love it.
preparing for the podcast, I was like saying to Ali, no, I let my guests talk and everything, but it's so interesting that I have so many comments. It's just I was thinking inadequacy, I've worked so much on it because I really felt inadequate for a long time that now I think it doesn't create emotional eating in me, I think. Yeah, no, I think tired is the most for me now. So just for the listeners out there, because I just also want to be vulnerable so the listeners don't think that, oh, some people are like overcame it and will never struggle. No, it's like a journey and it's like
It,
layers. Yeah.
totally,
Yeah.
totally, totally. I say it's a process that becomes a practice, and
Oh, yeah.
practices sometimes you have to, whip them out.
Yeah, it's so true. So
Yeah. And so,
inadequacy, I'm listening. I stopped.
yeah. So if you think about, and this is where we often use food for comfort. And again, often it's weaponized of like, food is fuel, don't act for it as comfort. But if you think about when you are first born, right, you have two survival needs: to be touched and to be fed. And nature in its brilliant design, and I have to give Dr. Deborah McNamara, she has a new book out called Nourished. She really talks about this, that food is really, that the belonging associated with food is actually, they've proven in neuroscience, more important. She talks about this in her book. So nature couples food with belonging, with safety, right? With the safety that we're, this physical safety, but also you're chosen. Your caretaker cares about you. And being hungry is uncomfortable. And so you're receiving food with comfort. And food, again, comfort food isn't bad when it's helping us through hard times. When, um, I think about, my family is Slovenian, part Slovenian, and it's like when I'm sick, my grandma would always make us fenugreek tea with lemon and honey, and
Oh,
she's like,
nice.
it's from the old country. And so, like, when I'm drinking that, I'm like, I could get emotional. Like, I'm feeling, because she's passed away. Like, I'm feeling
Yeah.
her, like
It's so
and we
funny.
say
I
that.
had the same story a few weeks ago. I was like feeling like things were really rough, and like as I said, launching the journal. Like I think actually I said I overcame inadequacy, but I think there was a bit of inadequacy deep down. And then we went to a restaurant and we had chicken, and the spices reminded me exactly of the recipe of my grandmother, and I felt, oh, someone's here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Oh my God, I got
yeah,
chills.
yeah,
Someone is there,
yeah.
right? And I highly recommend her book, Nourish, but she
Oh,
talks
really good.
about, and we know this from food companies exploit this, but scents are connected to emotion. And so as we're growing up, right, we don't start narrating our lives until we're 5 or 6. So it's like everything is sensory,
Mm,
everything is emotional, in those first 5, 6 years. And so,
yeah,
like, you being able to feel that, thank God you had that,
yeah.
right? Like,
Oh, wow, it's so
and
beautiful
so,
thing. Yeah,
isn't it? It's
yeah.
like, and then we weaponize that against people. Now, again, we don't want to be turning to food for every time we feel inadequate and need comfort. But this is, again, part of where we start to say, okay, maybe it's not me. How do I get more information? Because when we're feeling inadequate, we often build things up. And we tell ourselves things like, I should have already known this, or, oh my God, a lot of my clients will procrastinate on a work thing and then they eat and then they do everything at the last minute, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do I to get momentum on this? And this is where a lot of perfectionism comes in. So I'm not going to pretend it goes away overnight, but just being like, what do I need to feel supported is a really good question to ask yourself on whatever is making you feel inadequate. Because for a lot of us, and again, I can only speak to American culture, but I grew up in the 80s. When we were bad, we had timeouts or we were sent
Yeah.
to our room, and we were
Yeah.
really
Any country.
taught
Any
that,
country.
yeah, we were really taught that when you're struggling, you go at it alone. So a really great question is to ask, what support do I need?
Yeah.
And then the last one is loneliness. And again, think about how food connects us, right? Like, food is a great tool to help us feel connected, right? Can you think of times from your childhood or young adulthood? I mean, I think about my friends in high school. Whenever it was one of our birthdays, we would go out to eat and we would celebrate. Or, after, on Saturdays, we would go and get brunch. It's like, food is important to be connection.
Yeah. The example again, it goes back to my grandmother, where I feel And she was like like my mother, like she was alive, but my grandmother was the maternal figure in my life. She was so special to me, and I felt really seen by her. You know, when you feel like, as you say, sometimes you are with people,
Yeah.
but you're alone. But with her, I wasn't. Even if we were not talking, you know, not saying anything, sitting next to each other. And yeah, her food and her recipes, yeah, I think they
Yeah.
bring, yeah,
Well, I love that you bring that up because you could really trust her as a caretaker,
yeah.
right? Right. And so it's like, oh, I feel connected. I feel comfort. It's in the caretaking, not the food. And so when we often feel alone, again, we feel like we have to go at it alone versus, or we punish ourselves versus saying, like, you could ask Marilyn, you could say, how would my grandma take care of me when I'm feeling
Oh
alone?
yeah, oh, I'm gonna cry.
Right.
You and I are gonna cry.
Right. It's like, oh, I know the answer. Right. But the
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
and
yeah.
the need. Yeah. And
Sometimes
so,
just sitting in the silence because she had two moods, either talk nonstop or not talk at all. But not talk at all, we would sit and like it's just a presence, you know, this presence. I don't know. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you could say, what would she tell me right now? And maybe
Mhm.
eat something with spices, right? And it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, that emotion and scent is connected. And I'm fed on this soul emotional level that is invisible, but really matters when it comes to emotional eating. And so those are the tail triggers. And I hope people now have some ideas of tools and questions because it's going to be different in each context, right? If you're feeling alone in your parenting, right, you can't go to your kid. You got to go to
Yeah.
like another mom who
Yeah.
understands, right? But if you're feeling alone at work or with friends, right, there's different things that have to happen. So it's not about specific habits or behaviors, but the questions that unearth the needs that need to be met. And what happens is the sense of safety that we develop is I got my own back. And not that I have to do this alone, but I know how to tune into myself and get my needs met, often in relation with other people. But that I am not going to abandon myself and I belong, to
Oh,
myself.
it's so
So
nice.
that's what happens if we can. Yeah. Yeah. And then
Really
the food
aligned
takes
to
care of
what
itself.
it's really aligned to what I believe and what I do and what I feel. And it's really nice that you come from such a compassionate place, a place of with compassion
Yes.
and non-judgment. This is how it should be.
Yes. 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 Yeah. I mean, we have needs. It's okay. We're not
Yeah.
needy, right?
Yeah, I had a lot of people since I launched my podcast and everything, like they think because I talk about overcoming emotional eating and they're like emotional eating is bad. I'm like, no, it's neither good nor bad. As long as if it serves you, you can classify it in good. If it doesn't serve you and hinders your life and you do it every day and you cannot cope with life other than with food, then at this time, like I don't like to quote it as like bad, but no, it's time to work on it. So it could be good as well.
I love that you said that. It's like we recently had the end of summer here and my son we didn't do a lot of ice cream and I was like I just kind of felt like I was like, "Do you want to go get ice cream?" And he was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah." And I'm like, "That could be classified as emotional
yeah,
eating." Like,
yeah,
I mean, I split a serving with him, but it was
yeah.
like but
So
that
what?
was an emotion I wanted to share with him, like end of summer. Like it's ice cream. I feel like we eat ice cream and we should be eating ice cream in the summer.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like, what's the goal for you? Everyone individual has a goal. Like as I said, for you, it's monitoring your not having too low blood sugar. For me, it's not having too high blood sugar. If someone else is like in a complete other goal, like this half of ice cream or whatever, will it really hinder your goal? And it's like, no, it does probably it's not gonna have like I mean for me, maybe with pre-diabetes, yes, it will affect my glucose levels but maybe once like as you say it's not if you don't do it every day then
Yeah.
it's not going to
Well,
hinder.
and also it's like, I asked him to go right after lunch, right? So I
Yeah,
have full stomach. And then I made sure we walked, right? To
yeah,
bring because I mean, I don't want it to sound like I always feed my kids sugar, but it was like, okay, we ate lunch, we got the full fat ice cream, not frozen yogurt that's full of glucose.
oh
He
yeah,
just
yeah,
likes
yeah, yeah,
vanilla with sprinkles. We got the small sides. So, and then we walked. 15 minutes. I mean, it was only like 10 minutes and I had to carry him most of the way,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was like, okay, I know how to bring my levels down so I can still do this in a healthy way.
And
And
you
it's
did
the
it with
and.
intention. This is what I
Yes.
say. Some people say I'm like possessed by the eating. It's like, no, the goal is you do it with intention. You're conscious of your decision.
Yeah. But I want to say the possession is that I would look at that as just an accumulation of needs not being
Mhm.
met. And so, it's over time, I tell my clients this TAIL acronym in the beginning, you're going to ask yourself after the
Yeah.
fact, right? It's just this automatic pilot, this insatiableness, which is why my podcast, it's almost like you've been deprived of needs the way that you would
Mhm.
like restrict food, right? You've been
Yeah.
restricted of your needs getting met. And so you have to gradually just, satiate them. And so in the beginning, you'll just maybe after the fact, or you could even look at like a really hard week of eating that you had, go back and ask yourself this, right? And it's all a learning process to uncover, what our needs are. And they come down to feeling significant. They come down to feeling like intimately connected, not just like shallowly connected, and to belonging, feeling like we matter and we can take
Yeah.
risks.
You know Gabor Mate? He talks
Oh
about
yes, I
two
love
needs,
his work.
attachment and authenticity.
Yes,
Okay.
I love that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So what we're working on is attaching to ourself and
Yeah.
counting on ourself so that we can feel that safety and that security.
Yeah, so true. Okay, it's so interesting. I could talk about it for hours, but I promised the listeners we're going to talk about the other topic, which is functional nutrition. So let's
Yeah.
tell me a little bit or a lot about it.
Yeah, well, I think what it essentially comes down to is understanding what foods work for your blood sugar control and your gut health. So when I think of functional nutrition, I think of it as looking through the lens. Now, we
And
just
just
talked
a
about.
quick question for you. This is for everyone, or gut health and blood sugar is everyone, or for people that have problems in the gut
Oh,
or
I think
problems
everybody. Yeah,
with
I think
obesity?
everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that you asked that because,
yeah,
I've been doing this for 16 years. And even the first year, I was like, blood sugar matters for everybody. Now we have continuous glucose monitors. I mean, it's gotten really complicated. But your blood sugar controls your hormones, controls your sleep, or influences, I should say. So I really think of functional nutrition as looking again, food can be connection, it can be caretaking, it can be all of these things, and it can also be medicine. And it's one of the most powerful preventative medicine tools we have. And so when people are trying to figure out what foods work for me, they can use their blood sugar control and their gut health as a discernment tool, right? So if you're having, if you never feel satisfied, I think working on blood sugar is the best place to start because how you eat at one meal will set up how you feel for the next couple of hours. And that's blood sugar, whereas gut health is much more of a long term process. And when you work on one, you work on the other. So if you feel never satisfied, if you're having cravings, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It means you're not eating the right foods for your body. So I have on my website a breakfast experiment that people can take if they want. Um, I can send you the link. I didn't think I'd talk about this, so
yeah.
I
I'll
don't
put
have.
it in the show notes.
Yeah, but I do everything is experimental so that my clients can realize their bodies will tell them. I don't want to be another authority in their lives telling them what to do.
It's so true.
Uh,
It's so true because I had so many. But I completely agree with you. Just on a side note, just quickly, like, yeah, I had gestational diabetes, so I had to do all the tests and everything. And after every meal, I had to monitor my glucose level. So I see where you're going, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
go
But,
ahead.
and I will say to your question of like, who should be monitoring this? The important thing is because so many of us who struggle with emotional eating tie everything back to weight loss and calories, even if you're not going to magically not think of that. And so I want people to take one step further from the numbers, but connecting it to, does my mood feel calm? Do I feel like I have more energy? Do I feel satisfied? Do my cravings disappear? So again, this trusting in being taken care of, being satisfied rather than restriction, is this making my life easier when I eat this, not harder?
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to trust in that if we haven't, if we've dieted, if we, haven't had our needs met as children, and as young adults. It's not all about our parents. And again, none of this is to blame our parents. Our parents, I think most parents do the best they can. It's just to understand what we're dealing with.
It's true, because if you think just the diet culture is all about being adequate, like loved and everything,
Yeah,
so what you're saying also is being adequate. Like if your mood is good and everything, also it would bring adequacy to yourself. Like if you have more energy and everything.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. And so like in this breakfast experiment that I have, it's basically like you do two different breakfasts. You do one that's like eggs with, I think there's avocado in there or some healthy fats. Then you do one that's steel cut oats or quinoa, whatever you have access to, something that's more carb based, and eat the two different ones. And then if they do the breakfast experiment, you'll see I give you more specifically what to track. But again, I just said it's like moods, absence of cravings, absence of mood swings. And it's like you should arrive at the next meal, comfortably hungry, but not starving. You would probably arrive at the next meal if your blood sugar is balanced, wanting to make the healthy choice for you. But I have a lot of clients who they've worked with other people who are like, oh, you need to be vegetarian. Oh, you need to cut out carbs. And it's like, no, most people, at least my clients, most of them need some animal protein. Most of them need more complex carbs than they're eating. Now we have enough people eating enough fat. In the beginning, people were not eating healthy fats. But now I work with a lot of women like over 40 and midlife. You really have to focus on protein and healthy carbs, for muscle maintenance, for sleep, for all the hormonal changes. But I don't tell people this. I just give them experiments so that they can see like, oh my God, if I don't have like rice or potatoes or something at lunch, I want to take a nap and I'm craving something sweet 2 hours later. Okay, then try the carbs. Oh my God, it makes my life so much easier. Right. So it's like once you recognize how it really helps you feel better and more nurtured, you start to want to do this stuff instead of trying to please me, who you'll project another authority sense, onto. And I don't want that.
No, that's good. Oh, so functional medicine for you is, or nutrition, functional nutrition is glucose level and gut health, which is good because there's so much online. It's like this very niche product that you only find in one place, which is like take it, and not cow but goat, and not sheep but goat. Okay, it's a bit complicated, this thing, so
Well, and I'm glad you brought up that example, because what has happened now with functional medicine exploding is people think for a healthy gut, you need to restrict more and more and more. But actually, all the research shows, I mean, I shouldn't say all the research, a significant amount of research shows that the healthy guts rest on a lot of variety, actually. And so if you have to start continuing to cut out more and more foods, it means you're not getting to the root issue. So for example, for me to heal my IBS, I had to be off raw tomatoes. Oh my God, any tomatoes sent me in through heartburn. I had to get off gluten for a while. I had to get off dairy. Now I can eat all that stuff. Again, I don't do gluten all the time because it does make me tired, but it doesn't affect me the way that it used to because my gut has healed. So all of this function, the other thing I'll say about functional nutrition is people have gotten it really complicated. If you are not eating a lot of vegetables consistently, you don't know what balances your blood sugar, and you're not consistent, all the supplements, all the cleanses, all the detoxes, like you have to have the foundations right. So I would just plant that seed for people of like,
yeah.
do the stuff that's boring, that you have, that is challenging. It's not easy, right, to be consistent if you're emotionally eating. But you'll probably get more mileage if you work on that stuff, rather than spending all this money on testing that often may make you feel more pressured, and then you're going to rebel.
It's so true. So for gut health, if you want to end up this episode, two things that you think are good for gut health and two things that you think, no, we should avoid. Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Two things. I think getting a ton of variety of foods, trying to eat seasonally can really help you do that. So, in America, and I'm guilty of this, we eat like, I think the same 8 to 12 foods, right? Our ancestors ate like, there was like hundreds of kinds of apples, So trying to get more food variety is really important. And then the other thing that I think is important for gut health is learning to balance your blood sugar so that you don't overeat or emotionally eat. So I think about 50% of emotional eating is deregulated blood sugar.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And also one other thing is chewing your food. I mean, I've had clients get off heartburn medication from chewing food. I don't take people off meds, but they just didn't need it from
Oh,
just chewing their food enough.
oh, interesting. And two things that so these are the I know. So I think we did the good and the bad. Any other advice for gut health?
Yeah, I mean, I also think working on stress.
Okay.
Most people who have gut issues, autoimmune issues, they struggle with some sort of chronic stress. And these tail patterns will help you with what's causing you chronic stress. So again, I'm biased, but I think that the emotional work, it helps with the physical and the emotional.
Yeah, I
So yeah,
completely agree. Like therapy and everything. Do you think for chronic stress, what would you?
I think working on these patterns,
Yeah.
because it's stress again isn't inherently good or bad. It's how we think we have to respond to it and react to it. And most of us don't know how to take care of ourselves in the face of stress, which is then why we turn to food. So learning to identify our needs and realizing that it's not like put your oxygen mask on first. It's more, where's the win-win? How does this help me show up better for the people that and things that matter to me?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I really like how you're balanced and you're really like specific and things like you say it's not control, it's influence and things like that. It really brings credibility to what you
Oh,
say. And
I appreciate that you
yeah.
appreciate nuance because it's not popular out there on social media.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing, and you don't want to be like you cannot have one rule for everyone and one thing, and you're so sure. And then what science has proven is that like we keep on learning. So like yeah, why be so sure when like yeah. So no, but is and for those people that want more of this credibility, where can they find you?
Yeah, yeah. So they can at alishapiro.com. If you go to actually the Work With Me page, there is that free breakfast experiment. I can also send you the link for the show
Yeah.
notes. And then I can also send people in the show notes a link for them to do a coaching exercise that helps them identify their tail triggers, which one is the most prominent for them. So yeah, alishapiro.com. And then I always send people to my podcast, Insatiable. The last season was done around food as safety. So flushing this topic out even more deeply. And then I'm on Instagram at Ali, ALIM, as in Marie Shapiro, Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you for having me, Marilyn.